Okay, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mangg. Welcome back to Hanging with Mangg. And today, we're playing some Skyrim. So,
It's true, isn't it? A dragon has attacked Whiterun. How could mere men bring down such a beast?
Black Ops 4 did come out. On Thursday night. And I did get it, and I did play right at launch. I fired it up as soon as it was available. And I did play a little bit. I'm up to like level 12 or something like that. Obviously not as much as I could be, because I've been playing a lot of Skyrim. It doesn't look like it, because I'm only level 7. I just started this save. But, you know, I mentioned this last week, that I was, I modded Skyrim a bunch, because I like that. But I found that a heavily modded Skyrim on a high-end machine is not very stable. It's just not. And I heard that Skyrim Special Edition is much more so. And so I picked up Skyrim Special Edition, of course. And I spent another 15 hours or some insane amount modding this, and I find it is much more stable. And unlike when it first released, there are a lot of mods now available for Special Edition, to the point of this mod setup that I have for it. I am quite happy with it.
Come on in. Let me know if you need anything. Or take a seat by the fire and I'll send someone over.
Which is rare that I'm really happy with a mod setup. But this, I followed the, it was like the Nordic guide, if you are curious. It's like the Nordic guide for Skyrim Special Edition. Massive mod list. Like, just absurd. That's why it took so freaking long. But it looks great. At least I think so. It looks very good. And it has all the features that I'm happy with. The only bummer is, I guess, right now, at this moment in time, Frostfall does not work so well. It's not updated properly with the latest script extender or something like that. So I'm actually not using Frostfall, which is a bit of a bummer. I kind of like some features from that. But we've got Campfire, we've got like Ordinator, so we got all the good fancy expanded perks. Look at this restoration perk tree. It's just crazy. So I like all that. We've got realistic needs and stuff going. So I have to sleep and eat and drink. And yeah, it's just good. The big thing, the really one that I wanted to go through was Legacy of the Dragonborn, which adds just a crazy amount of content. And so I'm working right now going through that quest chain and all that to find all these cool artifacts. It's not a perfect setup. There are some problems, I think, in this inn. If I find here, like Delphine or whatever her name is, you can see she's got some skin problems here. I guess it's known as a face bug, which is mentioned in the mod guide. Could be a possibility. It doesn't, like, I'm not that kind of person that cares about immersiveness or anything. So it's not like, oh my god, I gotta fix this. I'm not gonna fuck with anything to try and fix that. Because it does not happen to many people. It's just, this is the one I noticed. That's a little creepy. But overall, it works pretty well. Yesterday I was having some problems with crashes, but I might have resolved it. We'll see. So,
Certainly.
yeah, it's pretty good. I'm sure eventually I'll get bored of it again as well, because that's just how it goes. That's how I operate, and I just get bored of games. But for right now, it's captured my interest more than Black Ops 4. But eventually, I'll get back to Black Ops. Probably not the whole Battle Royale mode, but something.
I'm sorry, but I'm terribly busy at the moment. If it's about my specialty wares, I'm afraid I'm sold out until sometime next week.
Anyways.
A Khajiit? The only one I can think of is a very curious-looking one.
This channel, this week,
She usually comes around the back of the inn around dusk.
we had a few different specialty things, but we also had Doom 2 going on and Final Fantasy 9. Final Fantasy 9 only has 2 videos left, so this week you will see the beginning of Final Fantasy 10, which is a fantastic Final Fantasy, but it is the start of voice acting. So if you loved all of my personal voice acting for the Final Fantasy games, that alas is coming to an end with Final Fantasy X. It's not a fully voiced game, but I think I just lost the gusto for voice acting, so I did almost none for that game. So Doom 2 will then continue on through into the next week. If you're listening to the music, you may hear some Enya. I downloaded like a music overhaul. Sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's really out of place and sort of weird. Anytime there's vocals involved, it just does not. There's some weird choices. But Enya, while I'm playing Skyrim, yeah, that's a pretty perfect fit. I also did a Hulk discussion video. I mentioned I was going to do this one. It ended up being a bit longer than I thought it would. It was an hour and 50 some minutes. So if you watched the whole thing, I hope you enjoyed it. But it was really one of those things where it's just.
No, never. How does she look? So human.
Doesn't even smell like a curiosity killed it. Watch your tongue or I'll cut
It was one of those things where I want to talk about the Hulk.
All right. You asked for it. Get him.
Fuck. I want to talk about the Hulk. I don't care if anybody listens or not. I'm going to talk about the Hulk. And so I did. Because I've been reading a lot of Hulk comics, so that just, it just gets in your brain. That's what I want to, that's what I'm all about. Oh, there we go. We got to crash the desktop. So I have not fixed that problem. It's something to do with the script extender version. Because for some reason it updates a lot. And plugins don't update immediately along with it. So depending on when you do your whole mod selection, you can have some issues. Anyways, so yeah, the Hulk video, I enjoyed doing it, so hopefully a couple people at least enjoyed listening to it. There's going to be more of those as I continue reading. Once October's done, I might watch the show. It's going to be really corny, and it kind of bothers me, because it's like, I'm so used to the modern Hulk, in the MCU, when he's jumping across buildings and just smashing giant things and just, the Hulk, because that's what you get in the comics. You can do whatever, you're not bound by any real-world physics and things like that. When you go to the 1970s show, and it's like, okay, the most the Hulk can do is, like, tip over a car. Because, they're not using CG or anything. How much can he really do? So I feel concerned that I'm going to be bound by, the show is bound by these physical activities with no CG. because it's always like, people are like, oh, CG, we don't need it. We just go back to practical effects and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, are you sure? I mean, sure, for some things, if you can accomplish it with practical effects, maybe it's better. But, I don't know, I just can't imagine the MCU with no CG. Ugh. Okay, all right. Can I record again? Thank you. Really, it only crashes when I die. And I have like a Wildcat turned on with the realistic damage plugin, so everything dies in like 2 hits, including me. So it can be tricky. Actually, I'm not even going to do that. Let's try and just not do any combat. It would be better. What else do I need to say? We had the Racketeer session on Monday for role manging, and then we also had, just not that long ago today, we had the Dread scenario, so I'll talk about those. I don't normally like to flood the channel like this in one day with 2 different things, but that's just how things lined up, and I'm not gonna not do Hanging with Mangg on a Sunday. So yeah, this coming week then is just gonna be Final Fantasy IX, the ending, and Doom 2. There's not going to be any more role manging this week. Over on the Exploring series, we had the SCP-610 video, which was a pretty big hit. A lot of people seem to enjoy that, which is good. Like I talked about last week, people just want videos on what they already know about and what's popular. It's not like everyone watching it knows the stuff that I'm talking about. Obviously, there are people being introduced to it. But, for the most part, it's just one big echo chamber. But whatever pays the bills, I guess. Then I also did the zombie video, which was a mythology thing for the month of October. You know, much like the other history and mythology videos that I've done, I just did it because I wanted to do it. You know, I knew it wouldn't get huge amounts of views, although the vampire and the werewolf video did alright for themselves. I was surprised. So maybe the same thing could happen for zombies. And right now it's sitting on 30,000, which is, that's, you know, it's very respectable. I'm not the type of person that's a view whore or anything like that. You know, I upload plenty of videos that get 5 views or so on this channel, and that does not bother me. Sometimes you just do what you do. This thing that I'm looking for is not on the map. Like, where? Did he give me a note or anything? Do I have anything to go off of? No? I'll have to look it up, I guess. We can just wander around the wilderness. We can look around. So zombies getting 30,000 views, I have no problem with that. That's perfectly fine. I was not incredibly happy with how that video turned out. In the end, what the fuck? Oh my god, I haven't played Skyrim forever. I forgot that's what happened. I don't remember there being so much shaking. Yeah, I could probably get on that. I think I made a couple errors. Notably, I said Walking Dead came out in 2013 instead of 2010. You know, when you're writing the script in just a couple of days, Mistakes happen. I tend to just blur through information and just try and... I think I just thought, like... That's probably, like, when I watched Walking Dead was in 2013. And it was just like, oh, it would be cool. That's cool that it just came out the same year as Last of Us. Like, oh, yeah, zombies and stuff. That was big. But no, Walking Dead... I should, like... If I would have just thought about it, that The Walking Dead has gone on for like 9 seasons, the numbers do not add up. But I did not think. It's funny. It's just for some reason how my brain operates. You know, it's not like I'm writing these scripts and working on these scripts and stuff for like 8 hours a day. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm not. The amount of time spent totally on these scripts could be shoved into a single day. You know, instead of spread across like 3 days. It really could. But it's just every time that I try and cram videos and do it in a day or in 2 days, instead of spreading it across 3 days or something like that, I find just more mistakes crop up. When I did all the Daedric videos, there were multiple mistakes across that whole series. And now when I'm doing these side SCP videos, mistakes are cropping up. Or these side whatever videos, the extra video every week. Mistakes just pop up. They don't pop up in the normal videos that I spend more time on. So for whatever reason, just... my brain needs that, like, cooldown period every day. And I need the time to, like, reread over what I've written. And just give it time to process and work itself out. Otherwise, without that's how mistakes happen. So, I don't know, maybe that's sort of common for writers, and that's why it takes so much time to do things. Because it's more than just the active process of sitting at a keyboard and just typing out letters. You know, there's a lot more to the writing process, I think, than that. So it's like, yeah, if you just total up the amount of time where my fingers are pressing keys into Notepad, it's not that much time, but the whole process... my brain just needs more time in order to make a solid product in the end, I think. It's not like I'm going to stop doing the extra videos. Because, you know, you got to pay the bills. You just have to accept that there's going to be those minor mistakes once in a while. So. I am tired. I can hear my woman. She's yawning. Hungry, thirsty, very tired, of course. Fuck off, pony. Ugh. It's a good shot. So yeah, that's doing fine. Then, of course, this week I worked on the video for the Global Occult Coalition, which a bunch of people have been asking for. The GOC, which is the more... It's kind of funny because it's the organization that has more governmental oversight than the SCP Foundation. You know, they're actually controlled by, like, somewhat by the United Nations, and, you know, they answer to these governmental bodies a little bit more than the SCP ever does, the Foundation ever does. And yet they're the more murderous, I suppose, of the two organizations. They're more likely to just eliminate and kill things, whereas the SCP Foundation cares more about containing things. So maybe there's a bit of a dichotomy there, but perhaps not. Perhaps not.
What makes this one weird?
Oh yeah, I also have this mod where it greatly, like, limits how much you sell stuff for and the prices of things. because it makes the speech skill much more impactful. So like a steel katana normally would sell for like, I don't know, 100. It sells for 5 because my speech skill is very low. Because ordinarily, I think if you play Skyrim normally, you can get absurd amounts of money very easily. So this is meant to limit it, and I think it's pretty good. What was I talking about? I was talking about, oh, the GOC. Yeah, so I think that video turned out all right. Yeah, it's just one of those things where I'm trying to summarize a really big topic. You have to cut out a lot of things. And so you have something like the GOC, where it's an entire organization. At one point, it had its own website. And so you've got all these tales and SCP articles written about them and connected to them and stuff like that. Like, I'm not going to be able to summarize all this stuff. You're just going to get a little primer. So it's about 15 minutes, which is fine. And I think it gives people a pretty good idea of the GOC. I didn't want to paint them in a really negative light, where it's like, yeah, they're terrible. They kill everything, and the SCP's foundation's great, and blah, blah. So I tried to paint them pretty neutrally, but the SCPs I mentioned does not put them in a really good light. So I think overall people are probably going to have a negative vision of them, perspective of them. But the artwork that I use is pretty badass. I found this one artist on DeviantArt. I forgot his name. But he did a whole bunch of artwork of, like, futuristic militaries and stuff like that, taking on, like, the Cthulhu mythos stuff, like threats. So there's one picture, I almost used it as the thumbnail, but I decided against it, of, like, them nuking Cthulhu and stuff, and I was like, yes, this is badass. It's a sort of, like, Charles Stross imagery and stuff. And of them, like, just in helicopters shooting at these, like, you know, mythos threats, and I was like, this is just perfect. So I was pretty happy with the artwork in this one. So yeah, I think it'll be a fine video. I don't think it'll be hugely popular because it's a bit of a niche topic compared to, oh, giant lizard and oh gosh. And, anyways, then for the extra video this week, it's going to be on a number that I forgot. It's Un-London. Un-London. So this one, I don't know how good it is as far as originality of SCPs and stuff like that, but it is one that I remember. It's one that I remember reading from a long time ago, and so I think that alone it makes it pretty good, since I've read a lot of SCPs, and there's so many that I've forgotten. But I remember it, and it's basically like a underground city that's sort of anomalous, and it built for a disaster. So it's sort of, you know, BioShock, or there's a lot of comparisons, and I'll mention how it's not an incredibly original topic, but it's interesting enough to warrant a video. And I've gotten a bunch of requests for it, although now that I think about it, I'm not sure if it's like one guy requesting it on a bunch of videos over and over, or if it's multiple people requesting it. I'm not sure, because I rarely look at people's names when I read comments. So it could just be one guy that really wants to see it. But it's rated fairly well, and I think it'll make a decent enough short video. It's short enough that it gives me a bit of a break. I'm not too worried about making mistakes. Although I was really confused because I wasn't sure if it's meant to be a duplicate of the City of London or the City of London. Because I think a lot of people don't know, outside of the UK maybe, that there's London, you know, the big-ass metropolitan city, and then there's the City of London, which is like the OG London. Way back in the day, there was something with like the Romans or something like that. They had this little city that they were allowed, and then London sort of grew around it, like Londoninium or whatever. So there's still like the actual little city of London is like its own thing inside the big city, and it's called the City of London. I think it's differentiated by like a capital C in city or not. I don't know. Like, I think like the actual borders of the City of London within the city are sort of vaguely defined. It's just sort of a part of central London. But I think Un-London is based on the big metropolitan city.
Come on in. Just
You have questions?
But anyways, moving on. We got more to
enjoy
talk
this
about
work
than that.
well enough, but I'm ready to retire. I've been thinking of
Fill my bottles with water.
Sure thing. It's yours for a day. I'll show you to your room. Right
No, you don't have to show me to my room. I know where it is. Anyways, let's sleep for a while. So yeah, the GOC video, that's tomorrow. Then Un-London is later this week, and I think the next topic is going to be on Sarcasm finally. Don't quote me on it until you see the video. Well, don't quote me on it until next week, but I think it's going to be Sarcasm. So that'll be fun. I like Sarcasm a lot. There's some really cool SCPs connected to Sarcasm that I'll finally get to talk about. And then so on and so forth.
If you're looking for the court wizard, you'll find him somewhere in that general direction.
What else? What else? So I guess we can talk about Mangg, I suppose. Although it seems ages ago. The Racketeers Session 1. So we had... so we have my character, Epoch. I guess Epoch is like the UK pronunciation. Why is this guy just dead? Why is he dead? I don't know. Strip him naked. In the US, I guess it's normally pronounced Epoch. I don't know. Epoch was funnier because it was like Tupac. So he has the power to reverse aging with a touch, and he can stretch. So he's pretty overpowered. Of course. Because I can just snake my fingers and my eyeballs through a building and just touch everybody and make them into babies. Or into dust. And I took an extra that gave me damage resistance based on my stretching level. Because, like, Mr. Fantastic and stuff, it's really hard to hurt him with, like, conventional weaponry. Because his flesh is so stretchy. And so I wanted that ability. Because I figured if I'm sticking my eyeballs and fingers around and stuff, if I didn't have that, it would be very easy to just shoot them and they'd be gone. And it would be terrible. So damage resistance at level, like, 7 means I'm really durable. So that was good. So I'm pretty overpowered. As far as just a standard situation goes. And my character's a billionaire. And if you ever play a superhero game, if you ever play a superhero RPG, make sure one person on the team is a multi-billionaire. It just saves so much hassle when you can just be like, well, let's get on my private jet and just go. Or, you know, let me call in a helicopter. Or let me bring in so-and-so. You know, let me just call up anybody. Or let me, you know, if a world-famous billionaire just has a lot of advantages. And so it did.
You there.
We're looking for someone.
No, I'm not helping you.
Pay good money for information.
Then we had Thomas's character is a giant mantis. he's a mantis man, and he wears like a human mask. That's like really realistic. It fools people, I guess. So he has like claw powers. He can claw people, and it's really painful. And he also has force fields that he can generate for some reason. It's a good view. It's a good view. So that he's got that going on. So he's pretty useful in combat. He can claw people, I suppose. Then we have Phil's character, who is useless. To put it lightly, I suppose. He's really like the... Oh, God. It's level 40. What the fuck? I didn't even do anything to you, Rhino. Yeah, he's useless. He's not even like a Black Widow or a Hawkeye, who are like, you know, relative to Thor and the Hulk, it's like, okay, what are they doing here? But they can still handle things on their own. Like, they still do really impressive stuff. It's just in comparison, they're pretty lame. As far as power level goes. But Phil's character is kind of like whatever his name is in Deadpool 2. Like the guy that had no powers whatsoever and just wanted to tag along. That's kind of what he's like. He does have regeneration, which is good, but he's not very good with, like, his regeneration's not that powerful. This is not Wolverine regeneration. Like, it does, like, 1 HP every other round or something like that. So, if you shoot him in the head a couple times, he's done. Like, he's pretty much done. I don't even know what his other power is. Oh, he can nullify other characters' power. Which you'd think, well, that's pretty damn good. Like, that could be really powerful. But the thing is, most of the characters we go up against are not superpowered. We deal with a lot of armed goons. And so he's really not that great against it. And then the big villain that you do go up against is going to be pretty damn powerful. And his nullifying powers... That's a lot of people. What the hell is going on here? You know I'm going to die here and we're going to crash. How did I not... he's not that powerful with either regeneration or his nullifying. So that's just the luck of the draw as far as random rolling when it comes to care gen. So I can't fault him an incredible amount. But it's just... yeah. Mert's character is a bit of an oddball. He has an alter ego, so he can transform between two different forms. His one form is not... His, like, default form His default form is just pretty much nothing. I think he has like an astral form that he can go into, but that's about it. But his main combat form, I think he can throw fireballs. I think that's like his main thing, which is pretty good. And then Studs is a character named Shadow Mage, which is a really terrible name. And his main thing is he can touch people to do like shadow damage or something like that to them. I think something like that. He has like an aura that can damage people pretty well. And then he can take on a shadow form. I actually didn't die. I'm impressed with myself. He can take on a shadow form, so he becomes basically a shadow. And he can slip under doorways and just, you know, sneak around pretty well. So, between him and I, we were pretty big powerhouses as far as the session was concerned. Oh man, it's 3 skins to get this pelt off this mammoth. Oh, 4! Holy shit. I get it, it's a mammoth. That's no easy feat. 5. So basically, we were called in by the mayor. A bunch of teenagers have gone missing. They're being kidnapped, and the criminals are managing to grab them off the street and then vanish out of sight. And so I decided the best way to track them would be to just have one of us act as basically a teenager. And we have a tracker on them, and we just follow them to wherever they go. This is the biggest pelt in the world. Because an hour is ticking by every time I try to do this. Okay, we got it. Oh, shit. So we did that. Studs was already pretty much a teenager, so we just put a tracker on him. He got abducted. We followed the tracker to this warehouse. I put my fingers and my eyeballs in the vents, and I started turning everybody into dust, and we busted in, and we basically wiped out everybody. I think one girl got dead, because... One girl got dead. One girl died because I couldn't stop a van that careened into a wall or something like that. And that was pretty much it. But the main head honcho wasn't there, and not all of the victims that were reported missing were there. So we still needed more info. So I think we had like a cell phone or something like that, and we had some... We had some paintings that we recovered on site, and so I contracted bone break fever. What the fuck? What, from eating stale food? How does that happen? Bone break fever. It's a mild common disease that affects strength and endurance. Stamina minus 30. And I'm disgusted by eating that old potato. I guess that makes some sense. And I'm really tired, so we might want to work on that. Anyways, I'm just gonna summarize real quick. We got the police to track down this artist guy who painted the paintings found at this warehouse. So we tried to track him down. We went to his house. We talked to his butler. And we found out this guy's in Switzerland or something like this at the moment. So in any other game, you'd be like, oh, fuck, he's in Switzerland. We'll have to wait till he gets back. But no, I'm a multi-billionaire. We get on the private jet. We fly to Switzerland. And we go to this guy's hotel. We don't know his room number. So I felt that I had been doing a lot at that point. You know, I'd been kind of overshadowing everybody. And so I'm like, okay, we're in the lobby of this hotel. If anybody wants to try and get the room number, go ahead. Whatever you want to do. And so I gave everybody an option, like a chance. Just whatever you want to do, get this room number. And, you know, I looked to Phil. He's got nothing. I looked at Thomas. He's got nothing because he's a mantis man. Studs was the one that first said he could do it. And I'm like, okay, you know, do it. And then he's like, actually, I don't know. And so I'm just like, oh, Jesus Christ. So I just walk up and I'm like, look, we're looking for this guy. I'm a friend of his. And they gave us the room number. And I'm like, I like rolled my eyes. Because it's just like, it's that easy. Now, maybe they would have had a trickier time because they're not a world famous billionaire. Maybe, but I don't know. It seemed like very simple to me. That's all it required. Very simple. I would have done that whether I was a world famous billionaire or not. That's what I would have done no matter what. Anyways. So we go to the guy's room. We like bust in. We bust him up. He tries to use some superpowers, but actually Phil did prove relevant. He nullified the guy's powers. And we were going to like dangle him out the window until he told us what we wanted. And so, you know, he was the bad guy. So we took him to the airplane because we had one of his paintings. We suspected at this point that he was turning the victims into paintings. He was like trapping them in paintings. So we wanted him to undo it. Because the mayor's daughter was one of the victims, and she was trapped in a painting. And so Studs had actually gone to this art auction, and some wealthy guy purchased this painting of the mayor's daughter. And so I guess Studs was planning to steal it or something like that. But he got into an argument with this guy, and he just didn't... We weren't just going to kill this guy. He didn't do anything wrong. He just bought a painting. We're not villains. So I literally just bought the painting from the guy. I gave him like $2 million. Because, you know, when you're not like tracking down individual coins or anything like that, you're just, yeah, you're a multi-billionaire. Here's a couple million. It's the mayor's daughter, you know. So I bought the painting. We put it on the airplane. We went to Switzerland. So we wanted the guy, the villain, to turn the painting back into the mayor's daughter. And so we're like, we tied him up. We brought him to the airplane. We're like, okay, you know, do your thing. We untied him. You know, do your thing. And so, of course, you know, he wasn't planning to do anything. He betrayed us, and he tried to, like, jump through the painting to teleport somewhere else. But we managed to stop him. And, of course, me stopping him involved me, like, grabbing his ankle and literally turning him to dust because of my reverse aging while he was half inside the painting. And I guess that effect, like, caused the painting to turn back into the mayor's daughter. So, that guy, the villain died. He is non-existent, but we did save the mayor's daughter, and that was the big thing. So there were other people, other victims that are forever trapped in paintings. We have no idea how to get them out, but we saved the mayor's daughter, and we saved the day. So we got paid. We each got paid like $100 grand, which for me is nothing. But I demand that I get paid. I'm not doing this for free. You know, it's just the principle of the thing. So yeah, I happily accept my money. And that was it. That was the session. We saved the day. You know, superhero. The only superhero game I've played is Icon, so I can't talk on a broad, you know, soapbox here. But I don't. It just seems incredibly difficult to balance situations, especially with 5 characters that all have wildly different power levels and powers. It seems really difficult to balance a situation. You know, in comic books and in comic movies and stuff, you have plot armor and you have plot contrivances. You have Deus Ex Machina. You know, you have all these things that are just like you can easily power down a character if need be for the situation. You can have Thor not just level everything automatically so that it seems like, oh, you know, Hawkeye, he's really relevant here. He's doing stuff. You know, sometimes it doesn't always work well because, you know, in like the Avengers, you have Hawkeye like plonking arrows around to you know, one guy at a time, one alien at a time, and then you have Thor like call down the lightning and just blast you know, 1,000 of them at once or something like that. So even, you know, people know these characters are very different, but when you're playing an RPG, you want everyone to be somewhat equalized as far as what they're capable of, and they all seem useful, they all feel useful. But, you know, RPGs are tricky. You take all these plot armor and plot contrivances and you sort of chuck them out the window because players can do all sorts of things that would not be done in a movie or in a book or in whatever. So it seems like Studs and I are far more potent in different situations for different reasons than, say, Phil's character. Because of this random generation and random, like, power level generation. Because you might get some really good powers, like regeneration or immortality, you know, super strength and all this stuff, but you might roll a really low level for them. So they're really, like, ineffectual. Or you might get some, you know, you might get stretching and reverse aging or something, but they might be really high level. They're really potent abilities, and you can do crazy stuff with them because they're so high level. So it's random. And I like the idea of random. I think it's fun, but this is not a 25-part campaign or anything like that. This is small-time stuff. So, yeah, I expect it to go for a few sessions. Honestly, I think, like, when we go on our cabin trip that we have planned, where we're going to do some Call of Cthulhu stuff, I think that'll probably be the end of Icons. Because after that, I assume we'll just continue that Call of Cthulhu campaign, unless something disastrous happens. But even then, we probably just switch to something else. So really, I expect Icons to just last until mid-November. So shouldn't be too long. Why, Wolf? Why do you make me kill you? Look, I have to grab you by the neck. Oh God. Yeah. So that's that. So today, then, we did Dread, which I talked about last week. I was planning to do. I couldn't think of an SCP that was good enough, and I couldn't really reconcile doing like a thing, hidden traitor type thing. I just was not sure how to do it. I didn't want to put that much effort into it, so I just looked up some pre-written scenarios, and it was basically a toss-up between the last scenario from the standard rulebook, which is called Beneath the Mask, which is a slasher scenario, but it's a little bit different because all the characters, all the player characters have, like, issues that might cause them to misremember or black out or have anger tantrums or something like that that could lead them to potentially be the killer themselves. It's not necessarily like a third party, some crazy guy that shows up and is butchering everybody. It could be one of the player characters, and no one really knows at the start because everyone has these like mental issues. So oh my god, I died. Okay, let me see if I can go to the main menu and then load that way. So I considered that one. I decided I wasn't sure if we had quite enough players because we only had 4 PCs. I think we could have done it. It probably would have been fine, but I wasn't so sure. Okay, that seemed to work fine. Look at me, I'm killing kids. Damn it. I'm killing nobody. So then the other scenario, the one I went with, was called Dread the Antarctic. It was not a thing scenario at all, but it involved a rescue operation to the Antarctic to rescue some explorers, and their plane crashes on the way in, so they have to like gather what supplies they can from the crashed plane. They're definitely low on supplies, and God, that realistic damage, man, it cuts both ways. I'm not focusing. I'm not focusing. And they go to the camp that was supposed to be set up there, and they find it's like half exploded. And there's these really vicious pack of wolves like hunting them down, and it's a survival situation. I picked it because it seemed fairly short, and I didn't want a super long one because we didn't have that much time. God, fuck! God. I'm just getting... Alright, fuck it. That's all the Skyrim you get to see. Every week with this, I can never focus. I think I'm getting worse. Okay, so... last year, we did like the Space Station 1. And it was with 3 PCs... and it was really surprising because I think the tower like never fell. It became so super close at the end, but I don't think it actually fell. Maybe they did a heroic sacrifice at the end. I don't remember, but I remember being shocked at how stable that tower was throughout the whole session. And they were just in the perfect zone of Jenga last year. And so I kind of expected a similar thing this year. But no, the tower fell multiple times this year, and the only difference between this year and last year was the presence of Mert. So maybe he is a destabilizing factor. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe he has like a gravitational pull that is affecting the Jenga tower. I don't know. More research will have to be done. But, so I expected them to do better than they did. But there was quite a bit of pulling involved, because they had to all pull to not be injured in the plane crash, and to retain consciousness from the plane crash, which they all chose to do. They never decided not to pull. And that, you always have an option not to pull if you don't want to. You can just accept the consequences, but they never... I don't know if they have ever done that in the last... since we've started doing Dread. I don't know if they've ever said, no, I'll pass. I think they always love to pull. And I think that just generally leads to quicker scenarios. Because there are all those things, or that's the whole point, is early on, the first half of a Dread scenario is all these smaller pulling situations that are just there to destabilize the tower. Like, you can refuse to pull entirely for the first hour, and you know, I'm not gonna kill you because you don't pull. Like, that's the thing. There will be negative consequences, of course, and there are definitely times you should pull to put yourselves in a better spot, but it's debatable whether you want to always pull or not. I think a big problem was when they went to go check out the second plane, which had a lot of their cargo. They made a bunch of pulls to save the lives of the pilot and the co-pilot of that plane, and they didn't know that by the end the pilots and the co-pilots would all just disappear. They have no chance of saving them in the end. They didn't know that, but I think when you're playing Dread, you do have to have a bit of a meta sense. I think you have to keep in mind you are playing a horror movie. And I think if you really want to have the best chance of survival, you have to think like, I'm in a horror movie. You have to make a bunch of... you have to be a bit greedier, I think. You have to care less about other people if you want to survive. There's, you know... In a lot of horror movies, the characters that try to be heroic end up just dying. And I think that's true for Dread. But I've never played Dread, so I can't really say. So, they got what cargo they could, and they needed to pull their plane out of, like, a snowbank using, like, a tractor or something. So the pilot and the co-pilot are like, okay, we're just gonna wait here. You guys go to the camp and come back with a vehicle and pull us out. By this point, of course, they've completely abandoned any notion of rescuing anybody. And there is no one alive to rescue. They're way past that point, but they don't know that. You know, this is supposed to be a rescue operation, but it's not... It wasn't a perfectly written scenario because a portion of it in the scenario is written with really no impetus whatsoever for them to go there. Because this is a survival situation. There's no reason they would go to this area that is not directly pertaining to their own survival. So that's why it ended up being a very short scenario, because it was written as a short scenario. And when you cut out a section of it, it gets even shorter. So it really only took them an hour and a half to get through it. Or to get to the end, I should say. So they get to the camp finally, and it's pretty much mostly destroyed. There's only a couple buildings left. They start poking around, and they get attacked by a big wolf. And they actually end up killing the wolf, although they make a bunch of pulls to do so. It was about to run off, and Thomas decided to take a couple extra pulls just to kill it. Perhaps good in the long run, maybe. I didn't have a finite count of wolves, and you're not supposed to have a finite count of wolves. So perhaps, probably better that it would have been better if he didn't kill it. Because you want to make the least amount of pulls possible. But they're poking around in these buildings, and they hear wolves howling outside, and it seems clear that these wolves have now surrounded the buildings, and they want to slaughter the whole group of them. So they start like barricading themselves in, but they don't really think that through too well. Because these wolves are like starving. There's no other food around. Wolves are not even supposed to be in Antarctica, and they know this, so they know something's up. It's music. So, you know, barricading themselves in, that doesn't really get you anywhere. There's no heating here. They don't really have much food on them at all, so they will die. You know, just sitting here hoping to outlive these wolves is... Because even if you do eventually outlive the wolves, they they managed to not get inside this building. You're still, like, in the middle of nowhere with no... You're gonna die. It's just no good. You have to deal with these wolves. And I think they sort of knew that, but... Mert, like, posted up in a corner of the building, and so I had a wolf, like, crash through a window next to him. And this is when Ziggy decided to be a hero and, like, put his revolver in the wolf's mouth. He specifically said that he wanted to put it in its mouth and pull the trigger, instead of just shooting it from across the room. That is the one advantage you as a human with a gun have, is range. But he decides to do that. And I think he later said he doesn't care so much about being like a hero, he just likes doing cool stuff. And this always sort of worries me because that's such a one-shot mentality. And the goal of Dread, I feel, should be to survive. Like, more than anything else, it should be to survive. That is the goal. That is how you win. And I kind of would prefer if they played it more like a board game than as an RPG. I mean, it's an RPG, don't get me wrong. But I think you should have a bit of a board game mentality. Like, the goal should be to win. Because if your goal in a Dread scenario is not to win, I think things sort of fall apart. Pun intended. You know, in an RPG, in a campaign, you can have numerous goals for your character and for the group and so on and so forth. There's no real... Well, there are times where winning is certainly a goal, such as in combat. Generally, winning is your goal in combat in an RPG. But in Dread, you know, it's a one-shot. It's always a one-shot. There's no Dread campaigns or anything like that. You are very fragile. You're in a horror movie. Survival is unlikely. But that should still be your goal. You're meant to be playing a realistic human character who, you know, I just feel like that's the point. That's the whole point of playing, is you want to survive. So that to win, then, is for your characters who survive. And so I feel like if you play a board game and your goal in playing a board game is not to win, I think things fall apart. And I think those people are usually questionable to play board games. I'm not pointing at Ziggy for this. But if you play a board game with someone and while you're playing they're just fucking around, like they don't care anything about winning, they're just like messing with you throughout the game and doing all sorts of shit that clearly does not help them win. They're just like, they're having fun by just fucking around. Like, those people usually aren't great to play board games with, because it's generally agreed that the goal is to win. I'm talking about just, you know, a standard, like, just a like Risk or something like that. Just a standard board game, not anything. You get what I'm saying. So Ziggy, in the end, Ziggy has never survived a Dread scenario, and he was the first one to die in this, and I'm not saying he, like, wanted to die in this situation, right? You know, the tower fell because the tower fell. It's bound to happen. That's just how it is. But me running it, when you're saying, I'm going to take my revolver and put it in the wolf's mouth, instead of, I'm going to, you know, stand across from the room and focus and try and aim and shoot at this wolf. Those are two different things. I'm going to differ the amount of pulls depending on what you're doing. When you're doing something exceptionally dangerous for no reason, that's what's bound to happen. So he died to the wolf. I'll try to quickly summarize. We're over an hour here. Eventually, like, the doors start shaking. The whole building starts to shake because this is like some ramshackle camp setup here. So the wolves are like shaking these building down because these are not normal wolves. They're smart. So to counteract the building falling down, Mert throws a stick of dynamite indoors. And there are gas heaters inside the building that will explode if there's any explosion. The scenario mentions this. So I'm like, okay, the building's falling on them, there's a dynamite explosion, and it's indoors, and they're all indoors with it, with the gas heaters exploding. This is fucking terrible. So I made them each do 3 pulls to avoid, like, significant harm or death. And they each did their 3 pulls. But 9 pulls on a already weakened tower is a big deal. So they all made it out, and they scared off the wolves. So they did well, but they significantly weakened the tower. It was not in good shape. They're like, okay, fuck all this. Let's just get this tractor back to the airplane. So they climb in the tractor, and they have to unfreeze the fuel. They have to warm up the fuel. It's frozen. So they set that up. Some more wolves attack them. They manage to scare them off. They all get in the tractor. They take it back to the airplane. And they need to hook up some cables from the tractor to the plane to pull it out. Mert decides to do this. So he's hooking up the cables, and a wolf is sprinting towards him. And I'm like, okay, what are you doing? And I think a good thing to do while you're playing running Dread, is do like countdowns in like tense situations, active situations. Do like countdowns, and they have to decide a course of action by the time you hit 0. Otherwise, I get to decide what your character just freezes up. I think that adds to the tension a lot, which is the point. So I did a couple countdowns. So he decided he's just going to finish hooking up the cables. He's just going to ignore the wolf and just let it happen. So I'm like, okay. I didn't want to just insta-kill him. So I'm like, okay, the wolf is on you, and it's just like shredding your back. But, you're hooking up the cables, and Thomas was sitting in the tractor at the time, and I'm like, okay, you see this happening. So he, like, hangs out the tractor door, and he fires his revolver towards the wolf. And he ends up knocking down the tower while doing his 2 pulls to see if he hits the wolf. So I'm like, okay, when the tower falls, it's not always the person that was responsible that dies. So he basically just shot Mert in the head. And Mert died instantly. But he did end up hooking up the cables. So they pull the plane out. Phil gets inside the plane. He tries to figure out how to turn on the plane. He finds that the fuel is frozen on the plane. So he goes outside to hook up some space heaters or whatever to unfreeze the fuel. And he gets mobbed by some wolves. And so he decides to do a heroic sacrifice. He knocks down the tower on purpose, because it was pretty much about to fall anyways. So he takes out a couple wolves, and then he sprints off into the distance, howling to draw the wolves away from the plane. So then we reset up the tower, and Thomas gets to the plane. He has to turn on the plane and fly out of here. And he did not go through the optional piloting course. So he has no knowledge of how to fly the plane. And he has no co-pilot. So first, you have to, once somebody dies, you have to reset up the tower. And you do a bunch of pulls to start based on how many people have died. So he had to do those. But then, since he is in this really shitty situation, he is not equipped at all to fly this plane out of here. There was a number of pulls involved as well. So basically, from the fresh Jenga tower, for him to survive and get away, he had to do 21 pulls. And it got a little hairy towards the end, but he did manage to do it. He did his 21 pulls, and so he was the sole survivor. He got out of there, and he flew the plane back home, I guess. So, Thomas, so far, is the only person to survive all 3 Dread scenarios, from what we remember. So, he's done very well for Dread. His goal of surviving has worked out for him. So, it was very short, like I said. I'm really hoping next year somebody else picks up the slack, and I get to play Dread. But I'm also looking at a game called 10 Candles, which is another horror game. where you set up, in a completely dark room, you set up 10 little candles, and as the scenario goes on, the candles go out one by one, and so it gets darker and more tense. I don't know how conflicts are resolved in that one. I don't remember. I don't really know any of the rules for it, but the concept sounds pretty cool. But at the end, once the last candle goes out, everyone dies. So no one can win. No one can survive a 10-candle scenario. So, I don't know, it's very different. It's more of like an experience, I think, but I'm kind of curious. So that was that. Okay, last thing then before we end here. Speaking of horror, I can give you my horror movie update of what I've been watching. I've been watching so many. Let's see here. So we've got, so I feel I really, really like horror documentaries. Like, fake documentaries based on a horror concept. Just for some reason, that sort of clash of, like, the really realistic approach with a horror concept that is normally, you know, so graphic and over the top. For whatever reason, I really like it. So, of course, I rewatched The Bay, which is one of the best examples of that. Just a fantastic... I'll watch that movie a couple times a year. It's just great. The Atticus Institute. Not incredible. It's like this sort of organization focused on studying the paranormal, like telekinesis and things like that. Sort of like a realistic X-Men type thing, and they really didn't have any real success, but then this one woman comes in that just blows everybody away, and of course there's something kind of special about her. It was alright, but there was another one, Savage Land. I really liked that one. This town in Texas or something like that gets slaughtered, just completely slaughtered one night, and there's only one survivor, which is he's an illegal immigrant. And so a bunch of the movie is sort of like this racial tension where everyone just, oh, he's an illegal immigrant, you know, of course he did it, you know, and then there's like that racial tension concept in the movie, but it's also based on like, okay, what the fuck actually happened? Because the guy that survived, he took a bunch of pictures of the night, black and white pictures, and so I don't know, I really liked it. I would recommend it. It sort of spoils too quickly what actually happened. Like, you realize what happened to this town pretty quickly. They don't drag it out probably as long as they should have, but yeah, I liked it. What else? The Dawn of the Dead remake, of course, I did my video on zombies, so I watched that along with Return of the Living Dead. Both of those are pretty great. The Crazies, the remake from 2010, love that movie. Timothy Olyphant is just amazing, and I always like Rhoda Mitchell, so I watch that one probably every year. Clown from 2014, this was the second time I've seen it. It's a really stupid concept at first glance, but for whatever reason, I think it's done pretty well. It's about this like clown suit that's actually a demon that just takes over this guy. It's kind of disturbing. What else? Eden Lake, talking about disturbing. Eden fucking Lake. That is just such a, you know, sometimes I talk about horror movies and sometimes I talk about despair movies. That is definitely, you will despair when watching Eden Lake. That's just a movie that just pisses you off, really. There's despair, and then it's just like, it just pisses you off. But it stars Michael Fassbender and Kelly Riley, and she does a really good job in that movie. The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Really, that movie is like a third of a horror movie. It's mostly just a courtroom drama kind of film, but again, it sort of is kind of like that documentary sense, where it's like this realistic approach, where it's like, you know, trying to argue the the veracity of an exorcism in a courtroom. I've seen it before, and Tom Wilkinson is just an amazing actor, so I really like that one. Not really a horror movie, but I threw it in there. Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. I've never seen this before. I had heard it was like one of the best Friday the 13th movies. I don't know. I wasn't crazy about it, but okay. I rewatched Get Out, which is of course an awesome movie. You know, I can't relate that much to it because I'm just a fat white guy, but I still think it's an entertaining movie. Grave Encounters, of course. I watch that every year. Always a classic. It Follows, one of the best modern horror movies. Although rewatching it, a lot of it is just not a very horror movie. There's a lot of that movie that's just like, you know, there's no, I don't know. Maybe because I know every scene now, and I kind of know when stuff is supposed to be scary and when it's not. There's not that sense of that first watch where you're like, you know, any scene, anything could happen. You know, you're always scanning the background. It's like now I sort of know how it goes. So it's lost some aspect of that. Lake Mungo, talking about that documentary style. Originally, when I first saw that, I was just sort of confused, but now I am certain it is a very solid film. It's just really well made. What else? New Nightmare. Nightmare on Elm Street. This is like the 6th one or something like that. It's New Nightmare. This is the one that's where it shows the actress from like the first movie. It shows her as like a real person and how she's dealing with acting. You know, just look it up. Or look up Cinemassacre's review of it. It was pretty interesting. A pretty interesting concept. I don't know if it was like... It's sort of really different than what you expect from Nightmare on Elm Street. It's a bit more subdued. REC, and I watched REC 2. Of course, REC is probably still my favorite horror movie. REC 2 is still kind of a letdown. I don't know, I just don't... Maybe I just had too much expectations for it, but I just don't love it as much as I want to. The Tunnel, another kind of documentary style, although the second half mostly abandons the documentary approach and just goes for the found footage. So I really like the first half when they first start exploring the tunnel and stuff like that. But I always like that movie. I know, I watched a lot. I'm almost done. Texas Chainsaw 3D. So again, you know, sometimes I want like a really good, proper horror movie, and then sometimes I'm just like, I just want something on screen where people are dying. I just need something. So Texas Chainsaw 3D has Alexandria Daddario, who is just insane. And the plot is just so fucking retarded. Especially towards the end, where she realizes that she's the cousin of Leatherface, and so she helps him out, and she helps him murder some police, some sheriffs and stuff, because she sympathizes with the Texas Chainsaw family, because like, oh, they were wronged by the police, and it's like these fuckers murdered and butchered innocent people and ate them, and oh my god, and she like knows all this, but she still sympathizes. It's like, no, just because they're family members, that doesn't mean anything. Fuck them. Oh god, it's so ridiculous. But like I said, sometimes you just want to watch people die. That sounds pretty terrible. My mother would be ashamed. And Silent Hill, of course, always amazing. Watch that every year. And finally, The Witch, which again, I can't get enough of that movie. That movie is just, it's like flawless. I don't know if I have a complaint about The Witch. The guy that did that is just, yeah. I mean, I realize I can actually understand how it's not a movie for everybody. It actually does not have like a great user rating, I think, because I think the trailers were a little misleading. I can understand how it's not everyone's cup of tea when you have, you know, the average audience member watching Texas Chainsaw 3D and stuff. I can understand how it's not for everybody, but for a section of horror fans, it's hard to get fucking better than The Witch. Alright, so that was everything. Obviously, I have a lot more horror movies to watch this month. We're only halfway through, but this is the time. I try to compact all my horror movie watching, if possible, into October. So I've got a lot more to go. Okay, this was a long episode. I apologize. Check out the GOC video tomorrow. On London later this week. We got some more Doom 2 and the ending of Final Fantasy 9. So that's that. My name is Mangg. This has been Hanging with Mangg. I'll see you fine folks next week.